Welcome to my channel Starwire Daily. Please share and subscribe and press the bell icon for new updates. Picture this. You're scrolling through your social media feed and suddenly you stop dead in your tracks. There's a photo that makes you do a double take and then a triple take. For a split second, you could swear you're looking at Madonna herself, circa 1985, in all her rebellious, unapologetic glory. But no, this is 2025, and you're actually staring at her daughter, Lourdes, who has just sent the internet into an absolute frenzy. Welcome back to Starwire Daily, where we dive deep into the most captivating stories from the world of entertainment. I'm your host, and today we're exploring something that has fans, critics, and casual observers alike asking the same burning question. Has Lourdes become the spitting image of her legendary mother? But this isn't just about genetics, darling. This is about legacy, rebellion, and the fascinating dance between stepping out of a superstar's shadow while somehow managing to embody everything that made that superstar iconic in the first place. So let's start at the beginning, shall we? Lourdes Maria Ciccone Leon entered this world on October 14th, 1996, in Los Angeles, California. From the moment she took her first breath, she was destined to live under one of the most blinding spotlights in entertainment history. Her mother? None other than Madonna Louise Ciccone, the undisputed queen of pop, the woman who redefined femininity, sexuality, and artistic expression for an entire generation. Her father, Carlos Leon, was Madonna's personal trainer at the time, a relationship that was as intensely passionate as it was brief. But here's what's fascinating. Even though Carlos brought his own striking Cuban heritage into the mix, it's Madonna's features that seem to have won the genetic lottery in Lourdes. Growing up as Madonna's daughter meant growing up in a world where normal didn't exist. While other kids were worried about homework and playground drama, Lourdes was being photographed by paparazzi, attending fashion shows in Milan, and watching her mother command stages in front of hundreds of thousands of screaming fans. But Madonna, contrary to what many might expect, was reportedly quite protective of her children's privacy. She made deliberate choices to shield Lourdes from the worst of the media circus, at least during her younger years. Sources close to the family have always maintained that Madonna wanted her children to have as normal a childhood as possible. Though let's be honest, when your living room doubles as a rehearsal space for world tours, normal is a relative concept. For years, Lourdes remained largely in the background. We'd catch glimpses of her at red carpet events, usually looking slightly uncomfortable, often trying to blend into the background despite being nearly as tall as her famous mother. She attended elite private schools, learned multiple languages, and seemed to be following a more traditional path than anyone might have expected from Madonna's firstborn. But then, something started changing. It began subtly. A photo here, a social media post there. People started noticing that this young woman wasn't just Madonna's daughter anymore. She was becoming something else entirely. Something that made people stop and stare, something that made veteran entertainment journalists reach for their phones to double-check dates and ages. The transformation wasn't overnight. It was gradual, like watching a flower bloom in slow motion. First, it was the bone structure. Those impossibly high cheekbones that Madonna made famous in the 80s and 90s. They were there, carved with the same sharp precision. Then came the eyes, that intense, penetrating gaze that Madonna used to captivate audiences around the world, now staring back at us from her daughter's face. But here's where it gets really interesting. Lourdes didn't just inherit her mother's physical features. She seemed to inherit something much more intangible. That aura, that presence, that indefinable quality that makes certain people magnetic even when they're standing perfectly still. Now, let's talk about personality, because this is where the mother-daughter dynamic becomes absolutely fascinating. Madonna has always been known for her calculated rebelliousness, her strategic provocations, her ability to stay 3 steps ahead of whatever controversy she was creating. Lourdes, on the other hand, seems to rebel in a much more authentic, unfiltered way, where Madonna's rebellions often felt choreographed, and brilliantly so. Lourdes appears to march to the beat of her own drum without caring whether anyone's watching or not. She's been spotted smoking cigarettes in public, something that would have been a carefully orchestrated photo opportunity in her mother's career. But for Lourdes, it just seems like Tuesday. And let's talk about fashion, because this is where the resemblance becomes almost eerie. Lourdes has developed a style that's simultaneously completely her own and remarkably reminiscent of her mother's early aesthetic. We're talking about that raw, downtown New York edge that Madonna perfected in the early 80s, but filtered through a Generation Z sensibility. She favors vintage band t-shirts, leather jackets that look like they've lived 1,000 lives, and accessories that suggest she raided the coolest thrift stores in Brooklyn. But here's the kicker. She wears these pieces with the same confident nonchalance that Madonna brought to her early performances. It's not costume, it's identity. But then came the photos that truly broke the internet. You know the ones I'm talking about. Lourdes attending various events, caught by photographers in moments of unguarded authenticity, and the resemblance to young Madonna became so striking that entertainment blogs started running side-by-side comparisons. The facial structure, the way she carries herself, even the way she poses when she doesn't think anyone's looking. It's like seeing Madonna's early career through a time machine. Fans started commenting that it was almost supernatural, this genetic echo of one of the most photographed women in history. Now, here's where the story takes an interesting turn. Because while everyone was busy marveling at the physical resemblance, something else was happening. Lourdes was quietly building her own identity, her own career, her own version of what it means to be a Leon. She's pursued modeling, but not in the traditional commercial sense. Her work has been more artistic, more editorial, more focused on creative expression than mainstream appeal. She's worked with photographers who specialize in avant-garde fashion photography, the kind of images that end up in high-end magazines read by fashion insiders rather than mass-market publications. And then there's her approach to social media, which is absolutely fascinating when you consider her lineage. Madonna has always been a master of media manipulation, someone who understood how to use every platform, every interview, every public appearance to further her narrative. Lourdes? She barely seems to care about social media at all. Her Instagram posts are sporadic, unfiltered, and refreshingly authentic. There's no strategic posting schedule, no carefully curated aesthetic, no obvious attempts to build a personal brand. It's like she's actively rejecting the very playbook that made her mother a global icon. But perhaps the most striking similarity between mother and daughter isn't physical at all. It's this quality of absolute self-possession, this refusal to apologize for taking up space, this innate understanding that conformity is the enemy of authenticity. Madonna built her entire career on the radical idea that women could be sexual, powerful, controversial, and unapologetic all at the same time. Lourdes seems to embody these same principles, but without the calculated public relations machine behind them. She's living these values quietly, privately, authentically. And let's address the elephant in the room, the pressure. Can you imagine what it must be like to grow up as Madonna's daughter? Every photo analyzed, every public appearance scrutinized, every choice compared to one of the most successful recording artists in history. The weight of that legacy could crush someone, or it could forge them into something extraordinary. Industry insiders who've worked with both women describe an interesting parallel in their work ethics. Madonna was notorious for her perfectionism, her relentless pursuit of excellence, her refusal to settle for anything less than her vision. Those same sources say Lourdes approaches her projects with similar intensity, but channeled through a completely different artistic sensibility. Here's something most people don't know. Lourdes has been quietly developing her own artistic projects behind the scenes. She's been working on photography, on fashion design, on creative collaborations that have nothing to do with trading on her mother's fame. People close to the family say she's almost obsessively private about these projects, wanting them to succeed or fail on their own merits. But back to that resemblance, because recent photos have taken the comparison to a whole new level. There's this one particular image. You've probably seen it making rounds on social media, where Lourdes is caught in profile, her hair catching the light in exactly the same way Madonna's did in those iconic 1980 shots. The angle, the expression, the way the shadows fall across her face. It's like looking at a photograph from a parallel universe. Fashion photographers who've worked with both women describe it as almost uncanny. One anonymous photographer told a major fashion magazine that directing Lourdes felt like working with Madonna's younger self, but with a completely different energy. Where Madonna was always on, always performing even during downtime, Lourdes has this natural, effortless quality that somehow photographs even better. And then there's the way she moves. If you've ever watched vintage footage of Madonna in her early club days, before the massive productions, before the choreographed perfection, there was this raw, instinctive way she inhabited her body, this natural rhythm that couldn't be taught or copied. Lourdes has that same quality, that same effortless relationship with her own physicality. But here's what makes this even more compelling. Lourdes seems completely unaware of these similarities. People who know her describe someone who's much more focused on her own artistic journey than on any comparisons to her mother. It's like she's living her life authentically, and the resemblances are just happy accidents. From a genetic standpoint, what we're seeing with Lourdes isn't entirely surprising, but it is remarkable. Sometimes children inherit scattered features from their parents. Maybe the eyes from one, the nose from another, creating something entirely new. But occasionally, very rarely, the genetic combination creates something that's almost like a direct translation from one generation to the next. Scientists who study facial genetics have noted that certain bone structure patterns, particularly around the cheekbones and jawline, tend to be strongly heritable. But it's not just the individual features, it's the way they come together, the proportions, the overall harmony of the face that creates these striking resemblances. But let's talk about what this resemblance means in the context of celebrity culture. We live in an era where being related to someone famous is often seen as a shortcut to success, where nepotism babies are called out and criticized for leveraging their parents' connections. Lourdes finds herself in this incredibly unique position where she could trade on her mother's fame, but she seems almost aggressively uninterested in doing so. Industry veterans say this is actually quite rare. Most celebrity children either fully embrace their inherited advantages or rebel against them in obvious, performative ways. Lourdes seems to be charting a third path, acknowledging her heritage without being defined by it, using her natural gifts without apologizing for where they came from. And let's be honest about something else. Madonna herself has had to watch this transformation happen. Imagine being one of the most photographed women in history and then watching your daughter grow into someone who looks exactly like you did at the height of your powers. There must be something both thrilling and slightly surreal about seeing your own youth reflected back at you through your child. Sources close to the family suggest that Madonna is incredibly proud of Lourdes' independence and artistic integrity. Despite what tabloids might want you to believe, their relationship appears to be strong, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Madonna reportedly admires her daughter's refusal to take the easy path, her commitment to developing her own voice and vision. But here's where the story gets really interesting, because Lourdes isn't just passively resembling her mother. She's actively reinterpreting that aesthetic for a new generation. Take her approach to beauty, for example. Where Madonna's early look was often about pushing boundaries and shocking audiences, Lourdes' beauty feels more organic, more lived in, more naturally rebellious. She's been spotted wearing minimal makeup, letting her natural features speak for themselves in a way that actually enhances the resemblance to her mother's bone structure. It's like she's stripping away all the artifice to reveal the pure genetic foundation that she and Madonna share. Fashion insiders have started taking notice. There are whispers about potential collaborations, about brands that would love to work with someone who embodies this perfect blend of vintage Madonna attitude and contemporary Gen Z authenticity. But here's what's remarkable. Lourdes seems to be in no hurry to capitalize on this attention. She's selective about her projects, choosy about her collaborations, and apparently more interested in artistic merit than commercial success. This approach is so fundamentally different from how most young people in her position operate that it's actually become part of her appeal. And let's talk about the elephant in the room, the comparisons. Because while fans are going crazy over the resemblance, both Madonna and Lourdes have been relatively quiet about the constant side-by-side photos and the endless articles analyzing their similar features. This silence is actually quite strategic, whether intentional or not. By not actively engaging with the comparison conversation, they're allowing the resemblance to speak for itself without turning it into a marketing opportunity or a source of drama. But here's something that might surprise you. According to people who know them both personally, the resemblance goes deeper than just physical features. They share certain mannerisms, certain ways of expressing themselves, certain approaches to creativity that can't be explained by genetics alone. There's this particular way Madonna tilts her head when she's really listening to someone, this specific gesture she makes with her hands when she's explaining something she's passionate about. Lourdes does the exact same things, despite spending much of her childhood trying to establish her own identity separate from her mother's overwhelming presence. And then there are the moments of pure Madonna DNA that shine through in unexpected ways. Like when Lourdes gets passionate about something she believes in, suddenly, you can see that same fire, that same uncompromising intensity that made Madonna a global force. It's not performance. It's pure authenticity, but the genetic echo is unmistakable. Let me paint you a picture of what this resemblance looks like in real time. Last month, Lourdes was photographed leaving a coffee shop in New York's East Village. She was wearing a vintage leather jacket. Her hair was slightly messy from the wind, and she had this expression of focused determination as she walked down the street. The photographer who took the shot later said he initially thought he was looking at archival footage from the 1980s. The way she carried herself, the angle of her jaw, the confidence in her stride. It was like watching Madonna's early New York days play out in real time, but with a completely contemporary twist. But here's what makes this story even more compelling. Lourdes has never tried to copy her mother's style or career trajectory. If anything, she's gone out of her way to establish her own aesthetic, her own interests, her own path. The resemblance seems to be emerging naturally, like a river finding its way to the ocean despite taking a completely different route. She studied at some of the most prestigious institutions, focusing on the arts, but in ways that have nothing to do with pop music or mainstream entertainment. She's explored dance, visual arts, fashion design, always with this underlying current of creative rebellion that seems to be written into her DNA. Fashion experts have started referring to what they call the Lourdes effect, this ability to make vintage pieces look completely contemporary, to take classic silhouettes and somehow make them feel fresh and relevant. It's a skill that Madonna mastered in her early career, this alchemy of taking inspiration from past decades and creating something entirely new. But Lourdes does it without the calculated precision that characterized her mother's early image crafting. She seems to put on clothes the way other people breathe, naturally, instinctively, without overthinking the message or the impact. And let's talk about the internet's reaction, because it's been absolutely explosive. Fashion blogs are doing deep dive analyses of every outfit. Fan accounts are creating elaborate comparison posts. Even people who aren't particularly interested in celebrity culture find themselves captivated by this genetic mystery playing out in real time. But here's what's really interesting. The comments aren't just about the physical resemblance. People are noting similarities in attitude, in presence, in this indefinable quality that makes certain individuals impossible to ignore. It's like Madonna's charisma has been encoded at a cellular level and passed down intact. Industry insiders who've worked with both women describe an interesting phenomenon. They say that being around Lourdes feels familiar in a way that's almost disorienting. Not because she's trying to channel her mother, but because she seems to naturally embody some of the same energy, the same magnetic presence that made Madonna such a compelling figure. One fashion photographer, who worked with Madonna in the 90s and recently shot Lourdes for a magazine spread, described it as shooting the same person at different points in time. The way light hits their faces, the way they instinctively know their best angles, the way they can convey complex emotions with just a slight change in expression, it's remarkably similar. But let's address the pressure that comes with this resemblance, because it's not all glamorous. Imagine trying to establish your own identity when every photo of you is immediately compared to one of the most iconic women in modern history. Every fashion choice gets analyzed. Every public appearance gets scrutinized for how it measures up to Madonna's legendary looks. Lourdes has handled this pressure with remarkable grace. Instead of fighting the comparisons or leaning too heavily into them, she's found this middle ground where she acknowledges her heritage without being imprisoned by it. She's carved out space to be herself, while honoring the genetic lottery that gave her such striking features. There was this moment last year that really crystallized everything for me. Lourdes was attending a Fashion Week event in Paris, and she was photographed walking up the steps to the venue. The photo went viral not because of what she was wearing or who she was with, but because of the way she moved, the way she held herself, the absolute confidence radiating from every step. Fashion journalists who were there described a palpable shift in energy when she arrived. People stopped their conversations, photographers refocused their lenses, and for a moment, it felt like Madonna herself had stepped through a time portal from 1985. But here's the beautiful paradox. Lourdes achieved this impact by being completely, authentically herself. She wasn't trying to recreate any iconic Madonna moments or channel any specific era. She was just existing in her own skin, and that existence happened to create an echo of one of the most powerful presences in entertainment history. And let's talk about what this means for both of their legacies. Madonna spent decades proving that women could be artists, provocateurs, business people, and cultural revolutionaries all at the same time. She fought battles so that future generations of women could have more freedom, more options, more ways to express themselves authentically. Lourdes represents something different, but equally powerful. The possibility of inheriting strength without inheriting limitations. She gets to be rebellious without having to prove that women are allowed to be rebellious. She gets to be sexual and confident without having to fight for the right to own her sexuality. She gets to be an artist without having to prove that women can be serious artists. In many ways, Lourdes is living the life that Madonna helped make possible. She's benefiting from all the barriers her mother broke down, all the conversations her mother forced society to have, all the progress her mother fought for tooth and nail. But she's also dealing with expectations and comparisons that Madonna never had to face. Madonna was creating herself from scratch, with no template, no genetic blueprint to live up to or live down. Lourdes is navigating the complex terrain of honoring her inheritance while establishing her own territory. And here's something that really gets to me. In a world that's often obsessed with artificial enhancement, surgical perfection, and carefully crafted images, there's something almost revolutionary about Lourdes' natural resemblance to her mother. She represents the power of authentic genetics, of unforced beauty, of inherited strength that doesn't need to be manufactured or maintained through external means. She's proof that real charisma, real presence, real magnetism can't be bought, learned, or surgically created. Either you have it or you don't. And in Lourdes' case, she clearly has it in abundance. So what does this leave us? What does the future hold for someone who's simultaneously completely herself and in living echo of one of the most iconic women in history? The truth is, we're watching something unprecedented unfold. We're seeing what happens when genuine artistic DNA meets complete creative freedom, when inherited charisma meets authentic self-expression, when the daughter of a revolution gets to decide what her own revolution will look like. Lourdes Leon isn't trying to be the next Madonna, and that might be exactly what makes her so powerful. She's not interested in recreating her mother's career or competing with her mother's legacy. She's interested in creating her own path, her own art, her own version of what it means to be a strong, creative, uncompromising woman in the modern world. And the fact that she happens to look exactly like young Madonna while doing it, that's just the universe's way of reminding us that some things, talent, presence, the ability to captivate an audience, are truly gifts that can be passed down from one generation to the next. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this entire story is that both women seem completely comfortable with the comparison. Madonna appears proud of her daughter's independence and artistic integrity. Lourdes seems unbothered by the constant analysis of her resemblance to her mother. They've found a way to exist in the same universe without competing for the same space. And honestly, I think we're just at the beginning of this story. Lourdes is still young, still exploring, still developing her artistic voice. As she continues to grow into her own power, as she continues to define her own version of creative rebellion, that resemblance to her mother is probably going to become even more striking. Because the best genetic inheritances aren't just about physical features. They're about character, about spirit, about the ineffable qualities that make certain people impossible to forget. And if the early signs are any indication, Lourdes Leon has inherited all of that in abundance. We're watching the emergence of someone who could very well become as culturally significant as her mother, but in completely different ways, through completely different mediums, with completely different messages for completely different times. The resemblance to Madonna might be what first captures our attention, but it's Lourdes' own unique spirit, her own artistic vision, her own unapologetic authenticity that's going to keep us watching. So what do you think? Are you seeing the same striking resemblance that's got everyone talking? Do you think Lourdes will follow in her mother's footsteps or carve out completely new territory? And more importantly, what do you think this genetic echo tells us about talent, charisma, and the mysterious ways that star power gets passed from one generation to the next? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to know what you're seeing in these photos, what you think about this mother-daughter dynamic, and whether you think we're witnessing the emergence of the next great cultural icon. If this story fascinated you as much as it fascinated me, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps us bring you more deep dive content like this. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we're always uncovering the most captivating stories from the world of entertainment, fashion, and celebrity culture. Until next time, keep watching, keep wondering, and keep celebrating the beautiful mysteries of genetics, talent, and the amazing ways that legacy lives on through the next generation. This has been Star Wire Daily, and I'll see you in the next one.